Okay, chalo. Good morning, friends. This is the class 3. Oh, okay. In class 2, we have discussed about GST, that is the constitutional provisions regarding GST. And after that, we entered into the main concept of GST, that is the supply, which is the king in the GST, as only the name supply plays an important role in entire GST law, entire GST Act or law. Today we are going to discuss uh, some part of supply definition. As supply we discussed about the meaning of the supply uh, and what are the transactions where a consideration was not involved, which is treated as supply. That is schedule 1. Now we are going to discuss schedule 2, that is transactions. 1 minute. Okay, sorry for interruption. Transactions, uh, that means uh, there is a supply which can be looks like where we classify for removing the ambiguities as supply of service or supply of good, that is covered in schedule 2, where subsection 1a, which deals with a particular supply, will be treated as supply of good only, and a particular supply will be treated as supply of service only. For removing ambiguity, that whether it is treated as supply of good or supply of service, this classification has come, and this classification has been introduced by through a section, that is section 7 subsection 1a, through schedule 2 through schedule 2 these transactions came into picture. Okay, as what is that ambiguity means? Previously in the old indirect tax regime, in case of a restaurant service, there will be a supply of good, that is good component, where as a restaurant will provides us the food, and along with the food they will provide some other services like catering service, as a bearer will come to the particular customer and he will serve the food, and there will be a service component and a good component in that. That means there is a supply of service is there, supply of good is there. As where the indirect in the indirect tax regime, for the supply of service, the service tax will be levied, and where there is uh, supply of good, a VAT will be levied. That means a VAT portion will be available as an abatement in the service tax, and for the good component, the VAT will be levied. Uh, like that it is there in the old indirect tax domain. But now in GST, what happened means there is no like service or a good here, as as section 71A says that the restaurant service will be wholly classified as supply of service only. Like that, uh, some uh, some supply is classified as supply of service only. Let us take another example, like where a works contract service means a contract which involves provision of services as well as provision of goods. That means a road contractor, you take a road contractor. As for laying road, uh, he will use a labor component for laying the road, and he will use the material component for laying the road. So as after introduction of these section 71A, it says that works contract service also will be classified as services only. There are such type of supplies will be classified as supply of goods only and supply of service. To remove the ambiguities, this section 71A this section 71A was introduced, and these section 71A, the types of services or types of goods that should be read with schedule 2. You can look here, as section 71A classifies certain activities or transactions constituting supply, either as a supply of goods or as a supply of, not both, either as a supply of goods or supply of services. Schedule 2 to the CGST Act contains the list of activities or transactions that has been classified either as supply of goods or supply of services. This helps in mitigating the ambiguities which existed in earlier laws. That means I told the one restaurant service and another is a works contract service, wherein previous for the material component VAT will be levied, where for the service component service tax will be levied. You see one of the example here, it speaks about the restaurant services and it is classified under composite supply, where the major supply is the service component. Supply by a restaurant is treated as composite supply since the food and services naturally bundled in the ordinary course of business. Specifically, by such composite supply will be treated as supply of service. Hence, the entire value of invoice shall be treated as supply of service and leviable to GST accordingly. Here, you need to remember one major concept in this. As in case of restaurant service providers, actually, in detail, you will be learned in the upcoming chapters, but for the sake of understanding, you remember here some provisions which I explained you. As for the restaurant service providers, there is no input tax credit. As I told you, when you purchase from a registered person and you involved in such businesses, as you registered under GST, for the inputs which you have purchased from the others uh, for the purpose of rendering services or the purpose of provision of goods, you will be getting the tax component as credit, that is input tax credit. And for these restaurant service providers, as it is classified as service under Section 71A of the CGST Act 2017, and for these restaurant service providers, there is no input tax credit. Like this, the government has straight away clarified, as there is as we will, as they will not give input tax credit for the restaurant service providers, and they need to discharge a GST at the rate 5% for the entire service they give. Why these blocking of input tax credit give means, uh, because um, and they give one benefit, as anything you provide, like anything you provide, and a 5% rate will be charged for the service that you provide. Like that, one benefit has been given by the government to these restaurant service providers. Why means, majorly, the inputs which the restaurant will be procured will be at the higher rate, like foods that cost at 18%, 12%, 28%, and if previously it was 12% with ITC and 5% without ITC, why what about this 12% with ITC? The government started losing revenue from the restaurant service provider. As the inputs procured by these restaurant service providers at higher than the output, that means there is an inverted duty structure thing getting happened with the restaurant service providers. So government started losing revenue. So they thought of not giving any input to the restaurant service providers, and flat away they have given a benefit of charging 5% without ITC for these restaurant service providers. That is the provision applicable for the restaurant service providers. This is all about the Schedule 2. There are some examples which are available in Schedule 2, uh, like a transfer. If it is purely involving goods, what are the transactions which are treated as supply of goods? What are the transactions which are treated as supply of services? That all transactions are specified in Schedule 2. Now we are going to look after that. Please concentrate, as this class is very important to you, as I am going to discuss some important circulars which you will get, which will be useful to you at the MCQ point of view, and also getting an adjustment in the 14 marks problem or 10 marks problem. So please concentrate and make note of some notifications or circulars which I am explaining. Okay, please concentrate. Now we are discussing what we are discussing. What we are discussing. What we are discussing. Yes, we are discussing the schedule 2, that are there are some transactions which are classified as supply of goods. There are some transactions classified as supply of services. And the first, that transfer, any transfer of title in goods. Title itself, it says that it is a supply of goods. Shivaji sells ready-made garments to its customers. It is supply of goods. Any right. It is not pure title in goods. It is only transferring right. If it is right, then it is supply of services. Title in goods, it is a supply of goods. Now land and building. Normally, in the definition of goods, they excluded land. In definition of goods, they excluded land and building. But the definition of service explicitly says that anything other than goods, it is a service. Definition of service, the anything other than goods, then it is a service. In that way, this land and building is classified as service. Okay. Okay. Any lease, tenancy, easement, license to occupy land, it is a supply of service. Any lease or letting of building, including a commercial, industrial, or residential complex for business or commercial or commerce, wholly or partly, it is a supply of service. Treatment or process, in meaning itself, in the wording itself, it is denoting that it is a supply of service. Uh, Transfer of business asset. Business asset means it is a supply of good. You can go through. Renting of immovable property. It is a renting service. So you can classify it as supply of service. Renting of commercial complex. Renting of precedence of religious place. Renting of property to an educational institution. Permitting use. That means right. Can go through all these transactions. I explained you the works contract also. It is treated as straight away supply of services. Previously, there used to be a material component and the service component. Now, in GST, to remove the ambiguity, which it is there in the old indirect tax, it be straight away treated as supply of service. Supply of goods by an unincorporated body, association, or body of persons to a member. It is a supply of goods. Okay. See, this is the important circular which I am going to discuss. Taxability of tenancy rights under GST. I will discuss with this with an example. Please concentrate as it is important. Let us take person A is there, person B is there, person C is there. What happened means A is the owner. There is one property named Vijaya Nilayam. There is a property named Vijaya Nilayam. Person A is there, person B is there, person C is there. Okay. A is the owner of the property, B and C is there. Now what happened here means A will be taking lease of this property. Okay. Means A will take and A will take, B will take the lease of this property. Now what B will pay to A? He will pay the lease rentals. Now, what happened here means there is a system in Maharashtra like that in some states, like it is a Pagadi system. What this Pagadi system means, A, what A will do means, other than renting the property to B, he will also give the tenancy rights. That means he will give the tenancy rights. Who A will give to the B. For the tenancy rights, A will charge that rent from B. What this tenancy rights under Pagadi system means, A is also giving right to B to let to some other persons also. That is the Pagadi system. That is the tenancy rights under the Pagadi system. That means B can rent that property to any other persons also. Now, what B will do, however, he will pay monthly lease rentals to A. What B can do, he can rent this property to any other person. That means he can rent to C. What are these tenancy right means? Uh, for these tenancy rights, you will pay the tenancy premium. No. Under GST classification, this GST classification, this tenancy premium is taxable under GST. So what grade in this means? Normal, it is like a lease rental only. This is, however, A is giving rent to the B. That means property giving on rent to the B, and A is charging the rent from B is paying rent to A, and it is the tenancy premium also same like B. Now, what in this example it is discussed like A is giving to right to lease also. That means in this tenancy rights, A is giving to the B, that is the tenant, for renting to the other persons also. Now, where when A cancel this agreement, A will be paying some amount to B. Okay. Original agreement is there between A and B. A is the owner, B is the tenant. B will be paying tenancy premium. So A is giving tenancy rights to B. When the agreement gets cancelled, A will pay to the B. When agreement gets cancelled, A will pay to B the tenancy premium. Now, what the circular says that what consideration paid by A to B as a tenancy premium for cancellation of the agreement is chargeable under GST. That is what here it discussed. Pagadi system, that is the transfer of tenancy rights against tenancy premiums prevalent in some states. In Pagadi system, the tenant acquires tenancy rights in the property against payment of tenancy premium, that is Pagadi. The landlord means the here we have A, person A is the landlord, maybe the owner of the property, but the possession of the same lies with the tenant, that is B. The tenant pays periodic rent to the landlord as long as he occupies the property. The tenant also usually has the option to sell the tenancy right of the said property, and in such a case has a share of percentage of the proceed with the owner of the land, where the tenancy B will pay to A the normal lease rentals. When rents the property to any other person, when B rents that sorry when B rents property to some other person, uh, A also has some share in the lease rentals which B has received from that other party. Understood? A is giving B the tenancy rights. B is giving that property on rent to some other persons. When that some other person pays lease rents to B, that rental income, in that rental income, A is also having some share. Okay. Alternately, the landlords pay to the tenant. That means A is paying to B the prevailing tenancy premium to get the property vacated. Okay. It has been clarified that the activity of transfer of tenancy right against consideration, active transfer of tenancy right against consideration, that is squarely covered under the supply of service liable to GST. Okay. Understood? Now, what is this joint venture means? Uh, what happened means a joint venture was established. Now what happened means this joint venture provides some services to its members. Normally in joint venture there will be members, right? So for the services provided by the joint venture to these members are liable to GST. That is what here we discussed. You can go through that. This is the priority lending certificates, and here they classified as priority lending certificates will be treated as in par with goods, and there is no exemption available to trading in PSLC, priority sector lending certificates, and that thus priority sector lending certificates are taxable as goods. Okay, there is no much great in this. Only some MCQ point it is important. Now non-supplies under GST. That means a activity It is not a supply. Not a supply means it is not treated as supply of goods or not supply of services. It is not a supply itself. Okay. What are those activities which are treated as not a supply, that is non-supply, which are covered in Schedule 3? That Schedule 3, those transactions are covered in Schedule 3. These non-GST classified as done under Section 7, subsection 2, clause A. Section 7 is the supply. Section 7(1) A is that transaction which are classified as supply of services or supply of goods. 7(2)A 7(2)A is non-GST supplies. That is non-supplies. It is not a supply. Transaction which is not a supply only. What are those transactions? First type of transaction is the services provided by the employee to the employer. Concentrate. Some important circular is there in this. Services provided by an employee to the employer is not treated as supply. Okay. Now, it is straight away. There is no explanation for this. Services provided by an employee to his employer is not a supply. That is covered in Schedule 3. Okay, it is not a supply. What great in this means? What great in this means? Before before that means of now employees providing services to employer. Employees providing services to employer. After cessation of the employment, what happened means employee will be received some amount from the employer. After cessation of the employment, employee will be received some amount from the employment. Why these employee will receive some amount from the employer? It is not gratuity, PF and all, not that thing. For not start, that means the employer engaged in some sort of business. For not doing this type of business, the employer will give some amount to the employee. Here, the after cessation of the employment means the employee employer relationship got end. Employer employee relationship got ended. So the amount which now employee has received from the employer is liable to GST. Okay. And first thing is, there are like a director service is there. This is the circular which the government has issued. Like make note of this director service. Now, director service are classified in two parts. Like now, when these director service will be treated as employer-employee relationship. When this director service will be classified under employer, when you can say that director will be treated as employee of a particular company or a particular organization means for the services provided by the director, if 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 the employer, not employer, if an organ, you take an example of an organization, services provided by the director to an organization, if the organization um, if organization deduct TDS under section 192. Okay, director is rendering services to the organization, to the company. Now, while paying amount to the director, if the company deducts TDS under section 192 of the Income Tax Act 1961, then that itself says that there is an employer-employee relationship between director and the company. Understood? If the company deducts TDS under section 192 of the Income Tax Act 1961, that itself says that there is an employer-employee relationship between the company and the director, and the director will and the 1 minute. Okay, sorry for the interruption. Ah, when the organization, that is the company, deducts TDS under Section 192 of the Income Tax Act 1961, while paying the amount to the director, then then that section itself says that there is an employer-employee relationship between the director and the company. So that is come under Schedule 3. When while making payment to the director, the company deducts TDS under Section 194J. That means there is no employer-employee relationship between the director and the company. Director and the company, there is no employer-employee relationship, so it does not fall under Schedule 3, and that is treated as supply and liable to GST, and that supply is covered under reverse charge mechanism. That we'll going to discuss detail when we discuss supply covered under reverse charge mechanism. Okay, this is the circular which government has given, clarified about the director services. Now, you should remember these. What are the transactions which are covered under Schedule 3? Okay, first one is employer-employee relationship. Okay, services provided by the employee to his employer covered under Schedule 3. That is the first transaction which covered under Schedule 3, and the second transaction is services by a court or tribunal established under any law for the time being in force. Okay, services by the court or tribunal established under any law for the time being in force. Court includes district court, high court. Okay, that means uh, there are some clarifications like for the tribunal, like it does not look like a tribunal, but it is treated as tribunal. This is one of the clarification. Like in order to provide inexpensive, speedy, and summer, as you know that Indian courts will run very fastly. For the purpose of, in order to provide inexpensive, speedy, and summary redressal of consumer disputes, quasi-judicial bodies are set up in each district and state. It is not looks like court or tribunal, but for the purpose of the government has provided some sort of things as they provide the services same like tribunals, so they may not be look like a tribunal but treated as tribunal. Okay, for the purpose of GST, in order to provide inexpensive, uh, speedy, and summary redressal of consumer disputes, quasi-judicial bodies are set up in each district and state and at a national level called the district forums. The state consumer disputes redressal commissions and the national consumer disputes redressal commission respectively. Consumer disputes redressal commissions, that is national, state or district, may not be tribunals literally, as they may not have been set up directly under Article 323B of the Constitution. However, they are closely with the characteristics of the tribunal, and the services provided by these tribunals you are not liable to, as it is not a supply. It is not a supply, so it is not liable to GST. That is, they clarified in Circular number 32 bar 6 bar 2018, GST dated 12th February 2018. Okay. Now, what is the first type of service? Services provided by employee to the employer. Second, services provided by courts or tribunals. Okay. Services provided by courts or tribunals. Services provided by employee to his employer. Okay. Two types. And the third is services provided. There are some elected post, there are some constitutional post, and there are some nominated post. What if this elected post means you will elect some kings. Okay, you elect some kings every 5 years, uh, called sarpanch, chief minister. Okay, these are the people who rule us. Okay, these are some elected post. Okay, services provided by these elected members are not liable to GST. It is not a supply itself. Okay, services provided by these members are is not a supply itself. That is services by Sarpanch, MP, MLS. Okay, These are the people who are directly elected by us. Okay, directly elected by us. I am saying directly elected, not constitutionally elected. Directly elected MPs, MLAs, constitutionally elected. Who is constitutionally get elected? Prime ministers, Chief Justice of High Court, Chief Justice of Supreme Courts, um, and these election commissioners. These are constitutionally elected, and services provided by these persons are not classified as supply. That means it is not a supply. You can see duties performed by any person who holds any post in pursuance of the provisions of the Constitution in that capacity by President of India, Vice President, Prime Minister, Chief Justice, Speaker of Lok Sabha, Chief Election Commissioner, C&AG, Chairman of Union Public Service Commissioner, what a name. Who are these nominated post means like chairperson of this TTD, Tirumala Tirupati Devasthanam, chairperson of these, mm, what you say, uh, there are some corporations like TSRTC chairperson, like that. These are the nominated posts, like government will nominate, and the services provided by these persons is not covered under GST as it is not a supply. What is the first type of supply? What is the first type of transaction? Services provided by employee to the employer. What is the second type of transaction? Services provided by courts or a tribunal. Third transaction classified under three. One is the elected post. Second one is the constitutional post, and the third thing is a nominated post. Okay. Now the fourth one is services of funeral, burial, crematorium or mortuary include transportation of the deceased. Services of funeral services, burial services, crematorium services, or mortuary services, including transportation of deceased in an normally ambulance services are purely exempted in uh, health services. Pure exemption is there for health services, but here saying not ambulance services, but they are